So I have helped a couple of friends with like some practices and things like that, but I am not usually big on being recorded for things, quite honestly. So I have
Doing
a
something
couple
new
of
today.
like, yeah, exactly. So I have not done anything with like a full podcasting setup or anything yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we could piggyback off of what we were kind of talking about through the phone call. So I do not specialize in neurodivergence, but I am exposed to a lot of what I would classify as like pop psychology stuff with in terms of neurodivergence, and it's not just with neurodivergence. It's really with any kind of psychological language. I think that the general public is being exposed much more than pre-social media, which is good in a lot of ways because I think it might increase access or someone's desire to seek out therapy. I do think it's maladaptive in a way to where people are misusing terms, or people that aren't specialized in a certain topic or sharing misinformation. And the way social media works, it attaches to like our amygdala. And so if something helps us feel nice, we keep watching. Or if something makes us very angry, we keep watching. And so I think it's created a lot of like different psychobabble that like a paraprofessional or a layman in terms of our field might just mimic what they've heard, and then it just creates a lot of misinformation. So that's my thought, and obviously I'd like to hear more from you because that's something that you spend a lot more time with than I do.
So for humans, we are at our base storytellers, right? So labels matter to us because labels matter in how we tell our story to ourselves, to other people.
Sure.
For a lot of neurodivergent folks, they've spent their lifetimes growing up without the correct terminology. And so there is a bit of hunger for that terminology. And so it can lead us to looking for a variety of sources in that. And I am a big fan of teaching media literacy because I do think it is an important skill. And it really comes down to sourcing things. For those of us, whether it's something that you're dealing with, something you're just curious about, looking at who you are going to for information is going to be a big part of things. So if you are looking for some information out there and you want to make sure that it is well suited to you, look for some credentials to go along with that person. Look for some kind of confirmation that peers are also evaluating their work. So even in TikTok videos, if someone has credentials after their name, they have other therapists that are also viewing that content and making those comments. So it is a tool to help us to screen and know what might be more valid and what might not. So I would encourage people to look in the comment sections on some of those social media posts. See if there are professionals that are weighing in and if they have similar advice or similar information.
Yeah. It's kind of forming as a peer review source.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. This bear with me because I get sidetracked. This reminds me of the love languages. And there was this huge influx of information about that in the last 5-10 years. And I was like, okay, I get the sentiment, and obviously our partner needs to help us feel X, Y, or Z. But just in terms of the philosophy of therapy, we put a lot of onus on like self-regulation and interdependence as opposed to codependence and co-regulation, stuff like that. And so I'm like, how is everyone talking about this? Doesn't make sense. It kind of goes against, in a way, a lot of what I've learned. And then I realized that like the dude who wrote it is just like a Baptist preacher. So I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Makes a whole lot more sense.
But the disheartening element to it is I'm seeing it regurgitated online from people with license behind their names.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this isn't like credible or statistically significant.
Absolutely.
This is literally written by a preacher, which probably, I mean, he means well, but it's not like therapeutic information.
And I think a main source of this problem goes back to, we don't actually understand really how the brain works. We have an idea of how different parts of it communicate to other parts of it, ideas, and obviously a good understanding of a lot of the structures involved with it. But what is different from my brain to your brain, from your brain to that next person's brain? There's so much nuance and context that we do not understand, that we do not know. And it is left somewhat mysterious to a lot of people. And that is, I think, where we get into kind of a catch-22 of sorts. We want to make the information accessible, so it needs to be somewhat generalizable, and it needs to be somewhat basic in order to be accessible to the average population. However, too much generalizability or too much of that ease in language, and we run into the other problem there. And I do think that sometimes the effort to simplify and to generalize really does break down into it no longer represents that valid science on which it was based.
Yeah. Yeah. So the term neurodivergence is like a catch-all. So how would you define it, and what do you see as some like the common signs?
I love these terms because we do see them interchanged quite often, but they do mean different things. Neurodivergence is all of us. That's all the different kinds of brain types in there. A neurodivergent brain ending in the T is going to be that different brain. So when we are talking about neurodivergence, we're talking about the whole universe of differences. When we are talking about neurodivergent, that is that specifically different brain. Neuroinclusive is another word that pops up quite often. And that is when we are including all of those different types of neurologies into whatever we are doing. So when I talk about neurodivergence, I'm usually talking about all of the different ways of processing, from emotions to cognition, everything that the brain does. But when I'm talking about a neurodivergent person, that means that their brain is processing usually from a bottom-up approach, a very sensory-forward approach. And so there is a difference in how we process information. But again, I love terminology. So I'm going to define process. We use that term all of the time in therapy. We talk about processing feelings and processing your thoughts. And we don't always define that for the clients, define that for the public. To process something is to make it meaningful to yourself. I can intake all kinds of information from my senses, from all kinds of different sources. But once I take that in, what do I do with it? I have to process and make meaning out of that. And that is the process. That is what we do in therapy. And so knowing how a brain makes meaning out of what it intakes is really important, because if I am not working with how that brain is going to make meaning out of that information, it's not going to stick.
Right. So what are the main neurodivergent types of people that you work with?
So I mainly work with autistic individuals, ADHD individuals, OCD individuals, but that term neurodivergent includes a giant spectrum of folks. So it is any brain that is processing in that non-neuronormative standard. So that is going to be people with Tourette's, people who stutter, people who have bipolar or may have had an episode of schizophrenia. There are personality disorders that go into that bucket. If it's in the DSM, it's probably in that neurodivergent bucket.
Yeah, so for you, it's predominantly, you said autism, OCD, and ADHD. And so what level of autism are a lot of the clients you've worked with?
Most of them are level 1, level 2. Because I do a lot of virtual work, it's very difficult to do anything with nonverbal clients or clients
Yeah.
who have any difficulty or barriers with communication unless they already have an assistive device or an app that would make that useful to us. So I am limited in some of the higher needs and higher support level needs that I might be able to treat, but I do level 1 and level 2. They usually we try to steer away from the levels once we get past diagnostics because those are really useful for workplace accommodations. They might be useful for helping our family members or our care team understand what what kinds of supports might be useful to us. But from there, the levels don't give us as much information as that individual person can. So knowing what
Sure.
their specific needs are can really help us to tailor the supports after that.
So if you see someone that's level 1 or 2 autistic, is that something that you're determining, or it's often something that's already been diagnosed prior to you meeting them?
Often something that's already been diagnosed prior to seeing me, although I do see self-diagnosed clients as well.
And then how do you, like, what is the difference in your experience if you were to meet with someone for the first time who doesn't have autism and then someone who does?
It is very much going to be in how I'm going to receive that communication and what kinds of processing, we are going to be doing. So if I am meeting with someone who is neurodivergent, we are probably going to have a much more directive style together. We're going to have more concrete examples, might use a lot of visual analogies specifically, lots of formatting that would bring up that bottom up processing. If I'm working with someone who is either not diagnosed or someone who is neurotypical, I'm going to be doing more of a top down approach. So things that are dealing more with what kinds of thought patterns are we having and how can we work on changing those thought patterns versus how are we experiencing an event and how can we help accommodate so that we can have a better experience of that event.
Yeah, it's interesting you're using bottom up terminology because that's a lot of times how I work with clients. A lot of the clients I see are high achievers, over intellectualizers. And so they stay in the thinking and it pulls them away from like the feeling and the being. And so like I could get kind of caught in like an intellectual banter with them, but then nothing is really happening because they're just leading with their strengths and able to like conceptualize very quickly.
Yep.
And there's no like work happening. So I have to go like from the bottom up. And I find that's really helpful. So it kind of gets the cognitive element out of the way.
Absolutely. For a lot of bottom up processors, experiences are encoded differently. Our memory is really important to our mood, and how things are encoded into our memory factors very heavily into how we feel about those things and how we feel about ourselves and moving forward, how we feel about the future events that might happen. Our experiential memory is very, very important, or episodic memory, I should say, is very, very important. And there is a difference in how neurodivergent brains do encode those episodic memories. So being able to elicit more soothing and comfortable sensory experiences can go a long way to giving a lot more calm and healing in the present and then thoughts about the future experiences as well. It might be kind of a strange lens, but narrative therapy can sometimes be really helpful for bottom up processors, even though it is very thought based. Helping them to re-experience something and hopefully bring up a different sensory experience with that can help to encode it differently as well. So working on episodic memory and what event and experience did you have in that event, that can be a really, really tough quality to break through to, but it can be really beneficial. We need to pull the feelings into the body and then release those out.
Yeah. So you ever worked with sand trays, anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Very big on the body work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I've never done sand trays with anybody, but I obviously learned about it in grad school.
Mm-hmm. I'm more of a big fan of fidgets and stims because my population tends to like
what
those
is it?
anyway.
Stims?
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Self-stimulatory behavior is what we abbreviate down into Stims. Most all autistic people, quite a few ADHD people, and several other people in that neurodivergent bucket experience a soothing sense from doing a repetitive sensory behavior. So for a lot of people, Stims are very texturally based. A lot of people will foil with their buttons, or they might have a rock that they rub, or they may do some rocking. And it is more of the sense of movement that goes along with that. So different stims for different folks. Some folks tend toward pain stims. Some tend toward those movement stims. It can be a whole lot of different senses.
So a fidget spinner is a stim.
It can be.
So a stim is like a more umbrella term for those things.
Essentially, what it helps us to do is neurotypical people have an easier time, and by that I mean they use less of their cognitive energy when they are regulating their stimulation. It's a much more natural process inside of their brain. Neurodivergent people often have to literally do that, and so it can create a lot of energy drain. And
kind of feel like brain digestion, like
exactly,
like it's a voluntary experience. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's like thinking of, oh, I don't ever have to think about digesting my food, but then this other person has to like set aside time and like it's an effort.
Exactly. Which is why we see oftentimes burnout happens even when that person is engaged with hobbies and doing things in a balanced way from the outside perspective. Neurodivergent folks have a lot of additional demands on their brains that come from not necessarily having as many of those automatic processes. So whereas a neurotypical or someone who is more neuronormative might experience taking a shower as, I need to go take a shower. And their brain automatically prioritizes which steps come in what order, and then they just start executing those out. And ADHD brain, for instance, is going to have trouble with seeing the picture of done. What is it to have taken a shower and see all of those steps at the same time in a priority? They have to manually do all of that labor. So that is a lot more energy that they are expending on that. And since our energy is made from our dopamine, they're going to have a huge dopamine suck that comes from taking that shower as well. The next time they go to take the shower, a whole lot of energy drain, I don't know, might not be worth it to me, especially if something else is more distracting or more interesting at the time.
Yeah, I was diagnosed ADHD at maybe 6 or 7, and I was put on a whole bunch of Ritalin, and it created like this weird, hollow, depressed state where like I had no affect, and it was depressive symptoms, hollow, and I got out of all that stuff. But I kind of wonder, because I think as a boy, education system isn't really designed for like a 6-year-old boy.
Absolutely.
And teachers aren't very equipped as to how to like intervene. And so they begin to just measure like behavior, and then they send you somewhere, and then you get diagnosed with something, and then they're like, okay, well, now we need to curb this behavior. Here's medication.
Yep.
Oh, he's a zombie, but he's not acting out in class anymore. And so I've always wondered, I'm like, was that a misdiagnosis? Because today I don't take any medication. And I struggle with like scheduling, like I mentioned with you, but like a lot of my memories of childhood at school, it was just, I had a lot of energy and I think I was pretty smart and I was bored.
Yeah.
So
that will definitely do it.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. Cause then I've also heard, and this is anecdotal, I've heard that like you can, depending on level of severity, obviously with ADHD, you can kind of like slightly grow out of it or just learn how to make it adaptable to where it doesn't really impede on daily functioning. So I don't know where I lie in that continuum, but I've always wondered about whether or not I was properly diagnosed when I was a kid.
You unfortunately were with a lot of kids that happened to.
In the 90s. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm a few years older than you. So when I was growing up in the 80s, they did not diagnose little girls, right, with ADHD or autism. Like those are not little girls.
They diagnosed you with hysteria, right? Put you in shock therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if they weren't going to pick in our brain at all, then they had no use for us. But I did have a lot of hyperactivity as a kid. It is interesting to note, too, that we can have a presentation of ADHD that is almost exclusively dealing with hyperactivity. And we can have a presentation of ADHD that is almost exclusively dealing with inattention. Yeah. So as a little girl, I had a little mixture of both with a touch of that autism in there. And I was not very easy to handle for a lot of teachers, which looking back gave me the absolute luckiest break on earth and got me into an advanced special education class. They're GATE in some places, LEAP, there's all kinds of different names for them. The way they had it formatted at my school, I think was a lot different than what I hear from folks in different parts of the country. But it allowed us to work out a lot of that energy through physical projects. And it allowed us to keep our brains busy with side projects quite a bit. So I noticed on my grades and the notes that were written home to school almost instantly that I was not nearly in as much trouble. And although teachers still had to make special accommodations for a little bit of my energy here and there, I did not seem to be as disruptive to the class. And, I'm sure you can remember as a little kid, when you're disrupting class, whether or not you can do anything about it at the time, when it's happening. And I do distinctly remember feeling much less disruptive in that full special education class. They do not have as many of those kinds of programs available to a lot of younger kids now. And I have watched kids that are in school now have a lot more trouble with mainstreaming because of how standardized it has gotten. And because there aren't as many different programs to accommodate for some of those needs. And in the 90s, they did start to just kind of throw medication at every kid. So there is a chance that you were misdiagnosed as a kid. There's a chance that it was more of a hyperactive presentation and you found ways to manage that. Often in adulthood, we kind of have three paths. We can cope, we can adapt, or we can mask.
Yeah, I do remember a consistent sensation of feeling intellectually stuck. And then if I think about like how I live my life today, I do have like 7 things happening at once.
Yep.
Like, I have this podcast, and then I have my business, and then I'm like a musician. I do all like this sound production stuff, soccer, climbing. I have a lot of things that are happening simultaneously.
And I notice it's got a mix of a lot of physicality in there too, which may be a good outlet if there is some hyperactivity going on. Yeah,
if I do have something, I definitely, fortunately, have been able to adapt it. For sure.
And that's really, I think, a critical part to things. Regularly, I will discuss with clients their medication. I am not a doctor. I do not prescribe. I do not manage medication. But oftentimes we talk about medication in sessions.
Sure.
And I will say that the way I typically will explain, especially stimulant type medication, is that it should not be changing your mood. If it is changing your mood, that is oftentimes a side effect of that medication. Even to some extent, some mood medications don't directly change your mood. They change the chemistry that allows you to form healthier thought patterns and regulate those emotions in a much easier way on your body. So it just allows your body to do its natural job better. It should not by itself be changing your mood. If you take medicine and feel elated or feel happy, you may want to go back and talk with your doctor again.
Well, yeah, it's like an antidepressant. You're not supposed to feel high or increase suicidality. You're supposed to feel like stabilized.
Exactly.
So whatever they gave me definitely did not stabilize anything.
Yeah. So that's what I would definitely be looking for. If I was going to medicate a kid now, one of my kids, or if I was giving advice to a friend, it would be if it is changing their mood or directly impacting their behaviors, you might want to rethink the prescription, rethink the dosage on that, go back and discuss some alternatives with the doctor. It should be setting up the right chemistry so that you can modify the feelings or behaviors or thoughts or whatever that problem might be for you.
Yeah, and it's kind of leading into something I've thought about for 2025 and trying to help educate like schools a little bit more. Because I think also there's a missing measurement where the way in which kids present at school, there could be a strong correlation between like what their home life is like. And obviously a teacher has to see like 30 people and it's crazy and they don't have the capacity to do that. Like if I'm a therapist and if I had 30 people to attend to, I couldn't properly see to that one kid who has a tough home life. So even with the training, I wouldn't be equipped to do it. And so I also like with school counselors, I'm not sure, like, I'm sure there's great ones, but I haven't met many of them. Like, I've not been impressed by that category of our profession. And so I've been thinking about, like, trying to meet with them a bit and design some kind of, like, funnel to where these people aren't, I mean, I don't really know if anyone's ever slipped through the cracks. It's almost like we're shoved through cracks in systems. But I'm like, there's just some missing piece here where like the amount of children or adolescents that are not receiving care and support is astronomical. And also with like families that can afford it. Not just like inner city stuff or like rural counties. I'm talking like private schools. Like they're not even doing it. So if they're not doing it, then the inner city schools definitely aren't.
And there's definitely some differences in access between those two.
Sure.
But it often boils down to school counselors are not necessarily acting as therapists. Their role is wide, far-reaching, and does not always intersect with ours. So every district is different. Every school is different.
Sure.
But my district, for instance, most of the schools have a school counselor, and then they have a crisis counselor. And when you and I might think of a school counselor or what it was back in the 80s and 90s, it's much more akin to that crisis counselor. That is someone that if the kid is having a rough day or needs to do some processing or needs something that is therapy type related, they might go see that crisis counselor. Whereas the school counselor is going to be much more focused on schedules, milieu within the entire school, making sure that classrooms are inclusive and that they are able to, as well as they can, structure toward the children that are in there. They're going to do a lot of the educational testing and a lot of the IEP meetings and things like that, but not necessarily do therapy or do what we might consider counseling. Yes.
And macro.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's definitely a missing piece there that I'm going to try to focus on and just be a bit more effective with it.
some school districts have programs where they will contract with outside therapists if they don't have like in-house crisis counselors. They will contract with different services outside. And those can be really great ways to facilitate additional resources coming into the school, because you can format it as part of a package so that while the school is not able to necessarily pay a private rate for things, usually you can structure a package so that it does help with a little bit more of some of the planning and some of the detailed monitoring as well, some of the student goals. Other programs that I've seen work really well are mentoring type programs, where rather than having professionals to students, you are equipping community members to go in there and help with more accessibility as well. Since, there are only so many of us, and we do usually have day jobs to do, eliciting community members. And then as the therapists and the professionals, we do help with some of the training of that mentoring that they can then go into the schools and really make a huge difference with a whole lot of kids and get that one-on-one attention, one-on-one treatment, one-on-one kind of presentation to be able to really highlight their strengths and work on some of those weaknesses too.
Yeah, my elementary school did have some mentors. I still remember one of them, actually. I don't know if this is accurate. My emotional memory is that he just left and I didn't see him ever again.
Oh.
But I don't know what happened. But I remember it was only like one person. So I think he was overrun.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But it's like also, with working education and you have someone that's like being paired with the mentor, it's like there's got to be other things that are being recommended too, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think about kids often and like what their home life is and how that might impact how they show up at school, and then how that might be misperceived or mislabeled as that like they're being just purposely disruptive, which I don't think many kids are that calculated. Sure, some might be, but it's like this is a behavior it's a communication strategy, and that's the only way that they know how to describe it. Right? Like most of the adults I treat don't know how to describe what they're feeling, and you're expecting an 8-year-old.
Not really describe what they're feeling, but then describe how someone can help them meet their needs.
Yeah, or like what's wrong at home. I mean, nothing, because that's what home is.
Absolutely.
How are they supposed to know?
And oftentimes their experience with adults is not being seen.
Correct.
Not being valued. So why would they trust another adult to do that when the ones that are supposed to care for them have it?
Yep. Yeah. So that's what I was thinking about as you were talking, just with the ADHD. And I will say too, neurodivergence runs in families. We know this. So when we have a neurodivergent parent of a neurodivergent child, oftentimes that can create additional difficulties depending on what each divergent is and how each person's presenting and what all the family traditions and culture tends to be. But oftentimes, if we are talking about ADHD, autism, some of those other related neurodivergencies, we are looking at overstimulation meeting overstimulation oftentimes. And so not only getting ready for school, but then after school as well, we have an overstimulated child and an overwhelmed child who is then overstimulating, probably already overstimulated adult. And so oftentimes we can see cycles of potentially neglect, abuse, maybe just unhealthy behaviors in there that stem from untreated neurodivergent issues. Yeah, because the parent wouldn't be able to self-regulate.
Absolutely. And then where can they co-regulate? Like there's nothing. Yeah. So then that kid has to go to school the next day and they know they have a need They don't know what that need is, and they don't know how to correctly express that need. And our human bodies are set up for survival. That child's body will help it to survive. It may come out as unhealthy behaviors to get that attention that they need to be seen. It may come out as shutting down because it's too hard to try to be seen anymore. It can present in a lot of different ways. But considering the undiagnosed rates of people in this country, I have to imagine at least some of the problem is untreated adults parenting untreated children.
Sure. Yeah, not just with possible neurodivergent stuff, but also just mental health stuff in general. Yeah, that's what I like. Often the adults I see when they're talking about their kids, I'm like, look, the best gift you could ever give your kid is your own capacity to self-regulate.
Yes.
Like that is the best thing that you could ever give your kid.
I don't know how based in actual science this is, because I'll tell you that I did not hear this until after my kids were well out of the crib stage, so I did not get to experiment with this in my own home. But my understanding is that little babies in a crib will kind of roll to one side, and I do remember my kids rolling all around the crib, but they will almost kind of touch the bumpers on all of the sides as they're rolling around. I kind of vaguely remember them doing that. My understanding of that is a form of babies trying to self-regulate, trying to understand where the boundaries, is this a safe atmosphere? And their body's just kind of naturally looking for those boundaries in order to be able to feel reinforced with things. And so being able to gently apply boundaries in a way that is promoting growth for your kids is a huge part of things. And that consistency is really key. And I would guess that in the work that you do, that may be a major problem, is that consistency. And in the work that I do as well, consistency can be a major problem. What happened in that day may completely change what happens in that evening time or on that weekend in a way that the family didn't see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have a hard day at work, how's that impact the stress tolerance? And then how does that impact your own consistency with boundaries with your kid?
And then you've got a kid who's been institutionalized all day long, right? And I'm a big fan of public schools, send my kid to them the whole time, right? But it is a very institutionalized feeling, especially for any little kid who does not fit that very conformative subtype. So most little kids are going to have some stressors throughout the day. And if we have a little kid who has maybe higher autonomy needs than the little kid next to them, they're going to struggle all the more. Demands and autonomy are important for every single human, regardless of how your brain processes information. It can be a stronger network for some individuals. And it tends to be a stronger network for children. Children feel a lot of demands on their little bodies, on their little brains, right? We've got sensory demands. We have cognitive demands, emotional demands. And kids see everything is a lot bigger. Even their taste buds taste more than ours do as adults.
Yeah.
So if they have a bigger experience of life, their chance of having a sense of feeling like those demands are taking away their autonomy and kind of crushing them down, they're at higher risk for that than we are if we have learned to manage that already into our adulthood. And we are less sensitive oftentimes to a lot of those triggers and demands as well. Again, because we've habitualized and kind of adapted to them over time usually. So little kids come home from school, they're usually pretty overstimulated or super overstimulated. There aren't very many little kids that come home and aren't overstimulated in some kind of a way. Some kids might come home and take a nap. Some kids might come home and have an attitude. Some kids might come home and present in all kinds of different ways. And understanding that they need to decompress for a little while before we get to the next thing after school can be really helpful in slowing down that barrage of demands on them and give them a little bit of that autonomy back so that you can actually get some better behavior in the evening time.
Yeah, and the often hated phrasing from a parent of "How was school?"
Exactly. I've
Yeah,
walked right in this door and you're already asking me questions. Questions are demands for my little body.
yeah.
And so if that parent could wait a few minutes or might say something like, I had a really great day today. I'm wondering how your day went today. Instead of phrasing it as a question, making it more of a statement that's open ended if they would like to contribute without necessarily putting that pressure on that this is a demand they must follow through with. It's a choice to engage in the conversation or go set your stuff down and have a lovely nap for yourself.
Well, and also kids are social oriented, not school oriented. So maybe even asking
Absolutely.
something about like a friend or something that was fun, something like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Like they're not
And
going to
again,
want to
that
be
gets
like,
back to
well,
that.
there was this one math problem I struggle with in
Yes.
second block. Like
Yes.
we're talking to a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you throw dirt on? I mean, something.
Exactly. Yep. Those sensory experiences are really important to kids. And again, the episodic memory oftentimes. So being able to say, how did that feel for you? Did you have fun doing that? Those can be questions that can elicit a little bit more as well. And if you are talking with a neurodivergent kid, offering some concrete suggestions as possible answers can help them to formulate their own answers as well. So, giving open ended questions is absolutely fantastic, but it can oftentimes feel like a demand in and of itself to that kiddo because now I got to think of all of the possibilities. Then I have to pick the best possibility, and then I have to give you the best possibility. So, oftentimes you'll hear autistic people say that they struggle with questions like, what is your favorite color? Or what animal would you be? Things like that.
It's too
Because
broad.
they're thinking of all of them. And then they need to find the best one that is correct, most accurate to the situation because precision matters. And then I can reveal the answer to that. It's a whole lot of brain work.
Yeah, and I think those questions after school with kids were really just questions parents give to kids in general are they're pain oriented. So I'm trying to assess, it's from love, right? And protection. I'm trying to assess the pain points of your day, which doesn't create like connection or safety, right? It's only centered on discomfort and pain and whether or not you did something wrong to contribute to that pain experience and how I can tell you how to do it differently so you don't feel that pain again.
But even in what you did right there, it's very much allowing that autonomy to remain with the person. You can tell me about how that felt, and we can work on solutions together. You get to retain a lot of that autonomy. That is a very important part of working with anyone who's experiencing distress at that time.
Yeah, they get to decide if they tell me or not. But I think as like parents kind of assume everything is their business.
Absolutely.
It's like, you got to tell me everything. Yeah.
That's that assumed ownership.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that could be helpful for people listening is if you are a parent thinking about different ways to ask that question when you pick your kids up or they get home from school, as opposed to how was school? I guess that's very heavily dependent on the context of the kid in general, but maybe stray away from how was school. Yes.
Try
something else.
If you've been using the same question over and over and over again, your kid starts to roll their eyes, change up the question.
Yeah, that's something I read about. It was like a therapist book, therapeutic noise or some kind of term that was talking about like how we create echoes where we just lean on the same phrasing over and over again, and then it starts to lose significance. And so challenging ourselves as therapists, but parents or friends, just like, is there a different way, a more thoughtful way that I can say the same thing? Like, am I being lazy right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's kind of a great way to phrase that is that it is the ease of it, right? Because parents are usually tired when their kids come home from school too. So thinking of a whole new phrase right then, and then being able to communicate that new phrase and then receive that information, it is more of a small talk feature of, are you alive? I am too. Okay, now we get to go on our way. So really contemplating what you are doing and what you are intending. What is your purpose and goal out of that after school portion? Or if we're talking about two adults coming home to one another after work, same principle applies. What is the intention? What is the purpose for that period? If it is to return home and get comfy before we have dinner, let's focus on that part of it rather than trying to exchange something that is routine for us if it's not beneficial.
Yeah. I think a lot of the questions when we come together, whether that's with a partner or a child, it's a, hey, how are you? Like there's not a lot of intention, and it's so ritualistic that the answer doesn't really matter, and neither does the question.
Right.
So it's just adding that unnecessary demand on both of us, really. It's like, I don't really care, and neither do you. Like, what are we doing here? Let's talk about something we care about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's take a moment and think, what do I really want to ask you? Not what do I just think I should ask you, or what have I usually asked you before?
I'm a big fan of examining the shoulds. Most of us subscribe to some amount of that social clock theory. I do things in this certain order because that's the socially acceptable, normed way of doing things. And I'm a big fan of living a little bit like Peter Pan, where we are really designing our adult lives for our needs and figuring out how to let the world work around us with those needs. So, for instance, I do not do very well because of a little bit of hyperactivity in there with sitting still for long periods of time. So I have really struggled with seeing more than 2, maybe 3 clients back to back without more than maybe 5 or 10 minutes of a break in between, because I'm essentially sitting still or mostly sitting still for 2 or 3 hours at a time. My body does not function well like that. So I have to take 30-minute breaks after every couple of clients and be able to move around and pet my cats and do some knitting and fidget with a few things and get distracted a little bit. And then I also have a timer to get back onto things. So if I were just to get into the capitalistic, 8-hour a day, or 9 probably for most people, 9-hour a day work day and doing from 9 to 5, and that's just the way things have to go, and that's just how people have to work, my brain would be on fire most days.
Yeah, I'd be in trouble. I did that briefly after grad school. I worked in addiction treatment, and it was like a 9 to 5, like 8:30 to 5. And I was like, yeah, this is temporary. Like I just felt like I was in prison. Man, it was brutal. So yeah, I did my time for sure, man.
And I have work jobs where there is a shift, but I can't take that normal sized shift in the day. There's got to be some wiggle room in there to be able to step outside, take a small jog, whatever that is, to get some of that energy out of my body and be able to regulate myself back down.
For sure. Yeah. And then we were talking a bit about testing. So doing some kind of psychological testing to determine if someone meets criteria, right? So me being a bit awkward at a Christmas function doesn't make me have autism. Or
correct.
It's the same with like a personality disorder where, if I think my ex was selfish, that doesn't mean that I can just now go around town and say that they had narcissistic personality disorder.
Right.
Or if my mom is moody, that does not mean that I just say she's bipolar.
So when we read in the DSM, those traits, those are human traits.
Everyone has traits.
All of us share those traits. The amount of traits in the right formation that raises to the right significance and has been present for the right amount of time. And if we kind of get that conglomeration of things, then we can apply this label to that presentation of these things. Mm-hmm. And again, realistically, we basically know how the brain works, but we do not have a great understanding of how that brain works. We don't have a blood test for depression. We don't have a blood test for really even genetic testing can't narrow down a lot of neurodevelopmental issues. They may indicate, right, and they may help us with a lot of comorbidities. They can be really great tools, but by themselves are not a singular tool of diagnostics. Even the formatted tests that we have are not a singular tool of diagnostics. Our own judgment, a lot of other things go to play in there. And it's usually more than one test at a time, quite honestly. But all of that information together can bring us toward a confidence level to apply a specific label to that. But yeah, a lot of people are going to find that those are human traits that we share. If it is not clinically significant, meaning that it is significantly impacting your daily life, we aren't even going to count that really when we are talking about a diagnosis, when we are talking about testing and assessment like that. We aren't necessarily counting the traits that you have. We are counting the clinically significant traits that you have presented.
Correct. Yeah. So that would be determined by a licensed professional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As opposed
and different
to
licensed professionals for different states, for different things. So, and your insurance plays a part in that too. Here in the United States, we do use a for-profit insurance system, and your insurance company can determine which types of professionals are allowed to test you, if those services are going to be covered. And a lot of insurance plans for adults do not cover evaluation and testing for some of the specific mental health disorders.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And that can be pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You do testing or no?
I do not. So in the state of Texas, if you are a psychologist licensed, you can go ahead and perform those tests. You can as some different licensures, but there are quite a few restrictions, some additional training that you need to do. Right. You need to have training in the specific testing that you will be doing, those test measures that you will be conducting. So there's a lot of good reasoning for why they want to make sure that that person is sufficiently trained in not just that evaluation, but in how evaluations are conducted and how to standardize those as well. We oftentimes will talk about, in our profession, we'll talk about IQ tests, and they don't really measure IQ. They measure processing speed, they measure working memory, a few other subtests like that. When we are administering those standardized tests, whether it be for IQ, achievement tests, for autism, for ADHD, anything that we are administering to a client as that kind of a test, we want to make sure it is as standardized as possible. But that leaves room open for not catching some things because we have standardized it. So testing can be very nuanced, and understanding specifically what that client might need as far as how standardized and how many accommodations, what those accommodations might look like before that person has been diagnosed, to know what kind of accommodations might be useful for them. So there is a lot of background that is really, really useful when you're evaluating people. So I would highly recommend that if you are looking for evaluation, that you are looking to see, one, what is accepted by your insurance, because that can be a pretty expensive endeavor depending on what you're looking at. And then also that you are making sure that that person has a full background in training and evaluation, whether that be by the kind of license that they have or by just simply the credit, continuing education credits that they've taken and the training they've taken after school. But knowing how evaluations and assessments work, as well as how to score them and how to interpret and present those results, is all part of that package of really getting a skilled evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the common push to make the sciences quantitative can really confound like what is considered significant also. Because it's like this stuff is so nuanced and contextual, and then we try to put like a Likert score on it or something.
And it often depends on how we interpret what that question means and how we interpret our thoughts or behaviors or what that question is asking out of us.
Sure.
For instance, one of the questions that often pops up in a lot of the ADHD assessments, something along the lines of, do you tend to interrupt people? Or how often do you interrupt people? Some derivative of that. And if I am a high masking individual who learned at a very early age not to interrupt people, I may answer no to that question because I learned not to.
Or you got like smacked every time you did or something.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
But the reality is what that's doing is it is masking my authentic presentation there. And it may be, again, because I'm not aware of that. It may have been so early that I learned that I don't know. Or I may have a very vivid memory of getting slapped whenever I did that. And thus I have masked and I know not to tell people that I do that, right? But either way, I am not revealing that, yes, I do actually, my natural presentation is to interrupt people. And I have to mask, adapt, or cope to stop myself from doing so. And in this way, a lot of the nuance, a lot of that context, a lot of the traits are hidden.
It's also relying on the client to have the self-awareness.
Absolutely.
There's plenty of people that interrupt and don't know that they do. Neurodivergent or not. Sometimes that's something that has to be brought about in therapeutic work.
Absolutely. Sometimes there are people who have been in therapy for 5, 10, 20 years and later find that they missed a diagnosis or that they were misdiagnosed because they weren't necessarily able to work on some of those things, or they weren't able to get to a place of really having felt safety in those sessions. And so that vulnerability to be able to reveal some of those traits, it may not be available in those sessions. That therapist may not be aware of some of those traits that are hidden. So creating felt safety as part of our therapeutic rapport, regardless of how a brain is processing information, is a critical part of therapy because we cannot assess and we cannot change when we're not able to be vulnerable and really get down into it.
Yeah. And I think even when I'm doing my best work with a client, I'm not able to see the full picture. I think that's pretty important because I can sometimes like think that I'm seeing all the pieces, but I'm only seeing one person. Like their life is so multidimensional.
Right.
I've never spoken to someone about my client, right? It's like that Johari window where there's stuff that some people know about me I don't know about me. A therapist can have insight into that, but like a colleague or a partner or a mother or a friend, right? They have vital information that I just never hear about. And the client may be withholding it, or they might not have any awareness about it.
Absolutely.
Or they could have like a misperception.
I will occasionally have a client who brings a spouse or a family member into session.
Sure.
We might be working on like some specific communication between the two of them, or usually I'm not necessarily conducting couples or families therapy outside of like skills-based stuff. But when I do work with them, oftentimes there are layers and nuance there that the client themselves weren't aware of, or weren't aware that their partner or family member realized was going on as well. Oftentimes we think we can hide a whole lot more than what we're actually hiding. And because our family knows that we're trying to hide it, they will start to avoid that conversation topic as well. And pretty soon that's just not something we talk about, but everybody knows it.
Yep, exactly. That's just my uncle's cologne, but it's actually Keystone Ice.
Exactly. And this is where we find patterns start to intergenerationally continue, right? And it can be really tough to break some of those. I find that more often now than even maybe 5 years ago, I am seeing clients, and I do think this is partly because of social media, that are realizing these cycles that have been happening in family because they are able to see how other people live, essentially. They're able to see that, that pattern may not actually be just a normal pattern that happens in every family. And the way that I was treated or the way that I am treating my children may not be a just normal way that everybody does things. And being able to sit with that discomfort is a really important part of growing in adulthood too. But I have been seeing a lot more of that recently. And I do think that there is some social media at play there because we are able to see
start questioning
what other people live like.
Yeah, it's as though as a kid, there's this contract written and the parent signs this for us, and then there's never a revision until we enter therapy. It's just like, oh, this is just the way it is. I'm contract bound, and I didn't even know there was a contract. And then in my teens or 20s or 30s or sometimes my 60s, I realized, wait, there was a contract I didn't know about that was signed for me, and I don't agree with any of it. I can revise it? What?
Yep. And that's why I'm a big fan of that Peter Pan lifestyle, right? And the high autonomy, because if we're able to instill in our kids a sense of valuing their autonomy and valuing their voice and their self-governance, that can help elicit a lot more doing things my way in adulthood, in a way that's actually useful to my life, in a way that helps me to obtain my goals and not put barriers in front of me.
Yep. Yeah, it's that hard transition from parent-child relationship to adult-adult. That's what I think about.
And sometimes, too, that comes with an extra layer of a realization that our parents were just growing up while we were growing up.
Doing everything for the first time like we were. Yep.
So often we assume as little kids that is a grown up, even how we phrase that, right? That is a past tense. They have grown. They are grown now.
I have a distinct memory of being in a coffee shop. I was maybe 10 or 11, and this dude came in with a suit and tie and got his coffee. And I have a distinct memory of thinking, like, this guy has got it figured out. And then it was so weird because I never really thought about that again until one day randomly I was at like a wedding or something. I went into this coffee shop and I had that feedback loop of that memory, and then me being that guy in the coffee shop. I'm like, I don't understand anything. Like, I don't know what's going on at all. Meanwhile, there's an 8-year-old boy looking at me like, wow, he's really got it figured out. It's like the cycle continues.
And so realizing that our parents are growing and that a lot of the other adults walking around in the world are growing as well can be helpful. Oftentimes, especially autistic people can struggle with, they call it the sameness paradox. And it is essentially a perception. And obviously, like, once we think it through, we can usually get past this, but it is that instant flash perception that because I feel this way, or because I think this way, or I would behave this way, therefore that must be generalizable to other people for the most part. And although, again, if we were to really think it through on a granular level, obviously we can realize that is not the case. But that immediate sensation of it must be the same for everyone else gets into the way quite often of being able to see some different perspectives in real time and being able to communicate different things in real time as well.
Which is a very freeing skill to develop. Because if I assume that everyone thinks and feels the way that I do, that that usually has the inverse reaction. It's actually isolating, because then I start to think like some distancing is calculated. It's like, oh, well, I would reach out after this and they didn't, but they're not me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or if I was my parent, it was like, it doesn't work that way, because the thinking and feeling is all completely different. And so maybe it's not as personal.
Right. And while that does not absolve other people of bad behaviors in any way, shape, or form, it does give us permission to not hold on to that sameness, to not hold on to some of those expectations, that there is a sense of conformity out there, because now I don't have to conform as much either.
Yeah. And that depersonalization has been very reparative for me and for my clients, for sure.
Absolutely.
Because I think it was Freud or someone was like, even with respect to a client, even if it is about you, it isn't. Something like that. Because we're all just sponges of our own prior experiences. And so, like, they're responding to me, obviously, but it's also an archetype to other different experiences that they deem similar.
Our memories really are a critical component of, again, we're human storytellers, right? So that memory plays very much into how we tell a story, what elements are in that story, and where that story leads to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was nice to meet you. We just kind of blew through an hour.
Yeah, it was a very good conversation. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm always open. I try to do at least like 1 or 2 guests a month. And then Melissa, she's got younger kids and stuff, so she's been busy with the holidays. But I'll probably meet with her some. But yeah, I mean, this coming year, if you ever want to touch base and do another one,
that'd be great.
Definitely open to it. Okay. I think that being able to talk to new people, it definitely helps me in my own path professionally.
Oh, I totally agree.
Kind of like forces me to not get into that mundane intellectual like concept of what I do. It's like, oh wait, I could do that also, or I could think about it this way, right? It's like not as can get very unidimensional for me if I don't talk to people.
Yes. And it gives you different ideas too about how your clients may be experiencing different things too, because I would imagine that, I never thought about it like that. Kind of goes in both directions. It certainly does for me.